Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here, the host of this show. If you are new to the show, go check out some of our past episodes in the archives. We've got all kinds of great interviews with CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs of companies ranging from Netflix to Kinko's, YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, and many more. And I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And my guest here today was introduced to me by a previous guest, Rich Pallera from Kermit, introduced me to Will G. He is the co-founder of Balti Virtual. It is a creative studio that has designed augmented reality and virtual reality experiences for clients, including Under Armour, PayPal, Stanley Black & Decker, Sagamore Development, NBC Universal. He's been honored as one of Baltimore Business Journal's Tech 10. And prior to Balti Virtual, he worked on a bunch of different video game titles, including European Air War, XCOM Enforcer, and Dungeons and Dragons Heroes, for a variety of different clients and companies. And before we get into this, this is brought to you by Rise 25 Media, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. And if you're listening to this and you've ever thought, should I do a podcast? We say yes. It's one of the best things I've ever done personally. And we specialize in helping B2B businesses with a high client lifetime value, how to do that. So go to rise25media.com, or you can email us at support@rise25media.com to learn all about that. All right, Will, pleasure to have you here today. And we were talking beforehand, and you got involved in the video game industry pretty early. I think it was, you said mid 90s or so. You decided on a career in video games. What was it like when you came to your family and said, "Hey guys, I'm going to go make a career out of this"? I'm sure they were thrilled, right? Forget law school, forget med school. I'm going to go video games all the way.
This is it. No, and first of all, yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate the chance to come in and chat. Well, I mean, I think they blame themselves. You know, they bought me an Atari when I was young, and my dad read an article in the Wall Street Journal in the late 80s about this thing that was coming from Japan called a Nintendo, and we went out and got one. And so, you know, it was all sort of set in motion at that point. You know, so were
you a kid, like you was just playing Nintendo and Atari hours and hours on end?
It was a big part of my childhood. I mean, I love to go outside. I love sports. I love all the usual stuff, but also this was right around the times when video games in the home became a thing for the first time. And so, I kind of grew up alongside that industry.
And were you already like tinkering and developing? I think Elon Musk developed a video game title, I want to say at like 10 or 11 years old, and sold it for like $500. It was like one of the first things he did.
I didn't sell anything, but my parents they put me in a computer programming class. So I was programming BASIC when I was around 10 or 12. And I of course wanted to program a video game. Back then it was really hard. So the best thing I could make was like a really simple, football, where it's like you type in the play and it's like incomplete pass, it would like be all text based or something. But I always had that
so
dream.
Much fun.
And I think I got like a Commodore 64 magazine at one point that just had pages and pages of code that I tried to type in. My mom helped me do it. And, at the end of the day, it like ran some very simple thing. It wasn't totally worth it.
Yeah. I don't know if you played around with like Codable or any of the kids programming apps now. If you have kids, I have my 8-year-old has played with it, and it is truly amazing to make, an interactive way to teach kids how to program, kind of the basics of programming.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with a lot of those different platforms. It's this trend you see in technology where things become more democratized, easier, more accessible. And it's one of the most exciting forces in that world, where before, in order to write a program, you'd have to download or buy some very expensive compiler, Turbo Pascal or Visual C++ back in the late 90s, early 2000s. That would be thousands and thousands of dollars, and set it up on your machine and configure a bunch of libraries and whatever. And now they have these online editors where you can just go in, type code, see the results in real time, change it. It's so exciting to see those types of tools.
So tell me the early days, so mid 90s, late 90s, when you're working on some of these different video game titles, what were you working on then? What was the experience like at that point in time?
Well, I really got into the game industry at pretty much the ground floor. I had been tinkering with writing my own games and 3D graphics things at that time. And so I was hoping to get a job as a programmer. I came in, I found out that there was a company just up the road from me. I kind of literally flipped over a box of one of my favorite games and saw the address. I was like, Hunt Valley, Maryland. Wait a minute, that's just down the street. So I started pestering them to give me an internship.
And did you like show up, or are you calling? You're sending letters in the mail?
Calling. And they said, "Oh, we don't have any internships. We don't need anybody. Just leave us alone." And I said, "Well, I'm willing to work for free." And then that suddenly got their attention. And they said, "All right, we'll come in. We'll hear about what you can do." And they needed me, and I actually got paid right away. I still have my offer letter where I got I think $8.50 an hour.
Nice.
Yeah. Hey,
good money.
And it was basically doing just kind of menial digital tasks. Like I had to edit some videos, World War II footage. I had to recreate a map of Europe by placing these little 2-kilometer tiles, like whether it's grass or river or forest over this entire landscape. But it was actually really fortunate because I got to understand the industry without having any huge amount of stress or demands on me personally. Like the work I was doing was very simple. And so I could do a good job at that and then look for opportunities to say, hey, could I program this little thing here or this little thing? And I was very fortunate that the team I was on was open to that. And I went from essentially being non-technical intern to a programmer, a junior engineer, an engineer, a senior engineer, lead, over about a 6-year period. It was really exciting.
Now, by 2003, you were working at a studio, and back then the model was much like producing a feature film. So everyone works really hard for 18, 24 months, create a big product, and then it was released on cartridges or discs or something like that. And you actually had the experience of your studio closed after that, and everyone was laid off. Take us back to that time. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it was very different. I mean, especially now in the kind of live app model where people are sending updates or they're tweaking the way that games play every single day based on how players are engaging with it. Back then, it was much more, you get one bite at this, you get your final version ready, you hit publish, it goes out into the world. And it was really at the end of that time, early 2000s, we were just starting to get the ability to like post a patch for your game. So if somebody knew to type in microprose.com and look for your game, maybe they could download a file to patch it. It couldn't be very big. It wasn't seamless. But really you had to get it right in whatever you put on the disk. And so that was just stressful from a development testing kind of code perfection standpoint, but also from a game design perspective where really the original designer's concept either worked or it didn't. And now I think there's a much more latitude with sort of adjusting and tweaking things you see in all these different live ops games where.
Yeah. And that's fascinating to me. So, you said that Zynga really pioneered this model where it's much like software. Software went from shipping on disks to now we have more of a SaaS model where software can be updated daily or weekly or monthly or whatever. And they can, as you said, you can ship patches and fix errors and things like that. And it's even gotten to the point of the data in the gaming industry where data scientists work on these games and they look at what people are enjoying in the game to give them more of it. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Zynga kind of did this in 2 levels. A, within the games. So exactly what you're talking about, looking at how are people playing the games? Are there any imbalances? Are there things that people are doing disproportionately that maybe need to be addressed? Are there essentially any balance bugs where, what doing a certain action gives you a disproportionate return? Is there a way to kind of smooth that out and make it a little bit more fair and level? They also did it in sort of a meta way where they would produce a bunch of different games and then see which ones were going well and which ones weren't. And they'd shift their attention to whatever was popular and kind of kill off the less popular ones. So they really took a very data first approach.
Like a Netflix model, right? Netflix kind of does something similar too, where I've noticed, I got young kids. And so I've noticed that there are certain titles. I'm sure they find that, How to Train Your Dragon or something is being watched ad nauseum on, the movie version is being watched ad nauseum on Netflix. And so then they go and they create a TV version of it. And maybe they do 1 or 2 seasons, but if you see 6 or 7 or 8 seasons, that people are watching it.
Yeah. And I think that's the digitally connected world now, where it's more of a kind of back and forth conversation and less of creators putting their work out into the world, holding their breath, hoping it's well received. It's more of, okay, think of like the TikTok model where people are constantly engaging or not engaging with content, and creators are getting a stream of feedback versus, what did the critics say?
Right. Now, a few years into this, around 2007. So as a result of your studio laying everyone off, you end up becoming kind of an accidental entrepreneur, right? So tell me about that. You end up starting your own company, or you and a couple of partners.
Yeah, 4 of us ended up starting a company. I was really fortunate because both of my parents left jobs in the corporate world and started small companies. And so they were working from home, doing whatever. And I get a front row seat to that growing up, to see if you sort of hustle and pay attention to what's going on out there, maybe you won't be a billionaire, but you can cover your bills. And if you're relatively engaged and smart, you'll find something that's valuable to people. And so I took for granted growing up with that as kind of a background thought process. And so when MicroProse closed and everyone was laid off, I immediately didn't really want to work for anyone else just because of that experience. It was right at the end of a brutal stretch of overtime and trying to really just do whatever we could to get this game out. And so we had this idea for a game. We put that together. It ultimately didn't quite catch on. And so we've sort of found, luckily, a bunch of friendly companies, contacts, people that were looking for essentially video game development odd jobs. And we took them on just as, oh, great, someone will pay us for this thing. Let's do it. And did that for about 13 years for a number of clients, ranging from museums to DARPA to the NFL. And so, yeah, a bunch of different kind of clients along the way.
And you had a fascinating experience. So the NFL actually, you acquired as a client to do a very early virtual reality project back in 2007. So first of all, what was virtual reality like back then?
It was bad. It was basically, I think people complain about virtual reality. If virtual reality experiences aren't particularly well executed, they can make you feel nauseous. They can make you feel, your eyes hurt and uncomfortable. Back then, the technology was such that it was almost impossible to execute them well. And so they were not terribly immersive. They were not terribly comfortable. But there was this idea, and I think that part of the spark of, I've been building these 2D or these interactive 3D environments for the last 10 years or so, but I've been looking at them on a 2D screen, and suddenly you can step inside, and just that idea and the feeling, even for a bit, like I think one of the biggest things was we were building a simulator that could also play back 3D versions of actual game footage of NFL football. And so, you could see, all right, this play, the quarterback dropped back. This is where the defensive lineman came, and seeing them, they look like from the normal camera perspective, just as when you're watching a game, you zoom in a bit, it kind of looks like playing Madden or something like that. But suddenly going into VR, even in this very rudimentary, not terribly immersive system, it was amazing how real and fast it felt. And suddenly it was like, what, playing backup play from a quarterback's perspective, where a guy's running at you and whatever, and this guy's going out, and you could actually see the height of your linemen as, these huge tall guys that you can't really see over, and all this stuff. It was just an amazing experience that just gave a taste of, okay, this is going to be something. And I've been pretty obsessed with technology my whole life, from pestering my whole family to all chip in to get me an Atari when I was a kid for Christmas, to hooking our computer to the internet for on CompuServe, or kind of the pre-internet. So and occasionally you come across a piece of tech that's like, oh, this has that feeling of something different, that maybe it's not going to be today, maybe it's not going to be tomorrow, but it will have an impact. And so that was
kind of like a leap forward, whereas like in the video game world, it's kind of been a steady evolution over time. And how did you end up, getting NFL as a client? What was your pitch to them? Hey guys, we've never worked on a virtual reality project before, but we'd love to have you as a client, and we'll start with you.
Yeah, actually, so that one started through a friend of ours who was actually involved in Microprose, the game company. He was the studio head, and initially they approached the NFL and said, and specifically the Baltimore Ravens started there, and then it kind of branched out a bit. But the head coach at the time was really into technology, Brian Billick. He was, I think, the first NFL coach to use PowerPoint instead of overhead transparencies, so innovator. And we went there and came with this idea of, look, what if we take your playbook and feed it into an AI, and it'll tell you whether or not your play will work or not? And he said, I'm absolutely not interested in that, but here's what I would be interested in. Could you can you show me, like, as barrels, kind of X's and O's moving around from a 3D perspective? And, that was a good lesson in kind of talking to your customer, finding out what they need. Don't just come in with your solution and constantly push that. And so we built this sort of playbook, 3D playbook, and then actually added the VR a little bit later as kind of an addition. It was something that we got excited about. And so, so it was initially pitched as kind of an interactive 3D playbook. Take something like Madden and show your plays to the younger players that way. Yeah. And we found that VR was actually a great addition, because there are a lot of, these guys are all super smart. They have a ton of experience, all the athletes, but they're guys that, learning differences, whatever, they wouldn't get a play just looking at a top-down diagram. They'd have to after that, they go out and do what are called walkthroughs, where they walk through a play slowly. And what they saw was the ability to see it in 3D and actually see it from their perspective was immensely powerful. Just that simple act.
Yeah. Now, as part of this process with the NFL, it was very early. The goggles that were available for VR was not very good. And you said one of the big epiphanies was you had initially worked with a headset that cost $250,000 at that time. And then shortly after that, around 2014, you got in the mail your Oculus headset, which you got off a Kickstarter for $400, and it was almost as good, which is amazing. So talk about that.
It was, yeah. So in order to get it, was a huge kind of light bulb moment where, the initial VR headset we were using, not even the expensive one, just the commercial one, it was about $1,000. It sort of felt like holding an iPad a couple of feet away from your face. So there was a screen, and when you turn your head, the image would change, but it wasn't really immersive. It didn't fill your field of view. It didn't feel like you were in there. And so we had the opportunity to try an extremely high-end commercial headset that was, again, about a $250,000, and it used a whole stack of screens per eye, and it had a cable running out to a rack of computers that were powering it. And it was pretty exciting. Obviously, it was prohibitively expensive for that application, but it was cool to see it. And then the big unlock, not even 5 years later or so, was the folks at Oculus, Palmer Luckey, had realized that, okay, if I take a set of lenses and use essentially a smartphone screen, I can get roughly that same effect where it's a high speed picture. It updates quickly. It's very immersive. It wraps around and it looks pretty good. So it was really eye opening, and it came kind of from display technology advancements that had happened because of smartphones.
And so this was inspiring enough that your first company, Digital Steamworks, is actually kind of wrapping up, and you end up going with one of your co-founders, starting your new company, Balti, and with a focus on AR and VR. This is about 2015 timeframe. Now, by 2015, were there clients out there that were looking for these types of services, or did you find that you were kind of like early to the market and it was kind of like you had to educate or convince clients to work on these projects?
It was a mixed bag. I will say the one thing I got completely wrong was in 2015, seeing that this Oculus, it was like, well, it's only going to be maybe a year, maybe two before everyone in the world has a VR headset. So let's just dive in and do that. That timing did not come to pass, not even close. And so we did a handful of VR things early. Like we found some great clients. We were working with Johns Hopkins. They're using VR to test patients with ultra low vision. So these kind of niche applications worked really well. And actually, I should back up. That was always the thesis was, look, VR isn't really going to, joking aside, it's not going to be on every headset or every coffee table in the world in 2 years. What will happen is there will be a handful of niche applications that make immediate sense today. That group will expand. There will be new ones that suddenly cross the threshold of return on investment. And then at some point, these things will become more ubiquitous, like personal computers were, thinking about like in the 80s and 90s, they weren't.
Right.
Not everybody had one. You kind of use one at school. It was good for certain tasks, but then now it's crossed the threshold. And so we thought the same thing would happen. So immediately went looking for, these kind of niche clients to do virtual reality. And then what we sort of stumbled into was building augmented reality applications that would run on a smartphone are more or less exactly the same as building a VR application that runs on a headset. From our video game days, it was the corollary is like basically like building a game for an Xbox and a PlayStation. It's like a little bit different platform with some slightly different capabilities, but the fundamentals are roughly the same. And so probably
and big difference in terms of everyone's got a smartphone in their pocket versus not having, VR goggles.
Yeah, probably 1,000 to 10,000 times difference in the size of the addressable market. And so 90% of our work has been in augmented reality, at least.
Got it. Does it feel like, you're just still kind of waiting for that market to develop and hoping that there'll be more applications? Or what do you do about that? Do you go out and try and find companies like you mentioned, Johns Hopkins or other hospitals, and try and knock on their doors and convince them why they should be doing VR?
Initially, we did. We looked for places where they were looking to either, do something very specific. We found there are a couple of use cases for VR where it has a huge return on investment. Simulating things for training or testing that are expensive or dangerous to do if you get wrong. Those types of things. Giving someone a sense of being in a place. Augmented reality we found is extremely eye-catching and also a very rich way to explain something. So if you want to show, a product or a process, you can have a 3D animation that someone can explore and interact with, and it can convey a lot more information than a video or a wall of text on a website or something like that. So found it's a very powerful communication tool. So we started looking less at do you want to do virtual reality or augmented reality? Yes, no. And what are you trying to accomplish? Are you looking to communicate a complex process? Are you looking to engage and entertain people for some reason? And we've even started to focus a bit more within those specialties.
Yeah. Yeah. Where do you see the market going? I know we're a little short on time here, but
Sure.
where do you see the market going in the years ahead? What are you excited about in this world?
Well, a bunch of things. I think, these quick kind of application, like gaming entertainment applications are always going to be, core of our business and something that we do. It's something people look for and engage with and enjoy. I think a little bit further down the road, there are some really exciting trends. You're looking at smart glasses. The kind of joke in our industry is that they're perpetually about 3 years away. We'll see.
Yeah.
But at some point, we'll cross the threshold of, glasses that you might wear outdoors, maybe to exercise, maybe to play a game in a park, connect with people, like what we saw with Pokemon, where people are playing a game, but they're actually going out in the world, they're moving around, they're connecting, they're socializing. That's really exciting, and thinking about taking that to the next level, as opposed to kind of the dystopian, everybody's plugged into their own simulation at home and playing games. So those are things that are really exciting. I think that the idea of a shift from smartphones to something more immersive, whether that's like glasses, some kind of headphone system, I don't know, that what that will unlock that's exciting to me is, in my lifetime, we've gotten suddenly all of human knowledge is available instantaneously digitally on the internet. And it's not in a particularly useful format. It's searchable on Wikipedia or YouTube. But what would be great would be to look at an object or a place and get that information, whatever about that is relevant to you at that time, kind of overlaid. So that's the part that I think is going to be a huge
It's a
change.
simple example, but I had to get new flooring in my house and recently bought flooring through my buddy Tal, his company Flooret, Flooret. Give a plug for Tal. And super cool that you could take a picture of your living room and then you can see the flooring overlaid on the living room. It's just, as you said, total difference between like kind of just seeing it in 2 dimensions on the website and actually seeing what it would look like in your living room.
Yeah, that kind of product preview is one of the early cases for augmented reality where it's shown a huge return on investment. Especially, IKEA, Amazon, all these different groups have an app where you can see the product in your space, see how it fits, see what it feels like. And it helps sell more stuff because people feel more comfortable, so forth. But really the big thing is that it cuts down massively on returns when you get something that's not, So
what it's actually, whether it's going to fit or whether it's going to, be the right, look and feel that you're looking for. Well, this is really cool, Will. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me. Where can people go to learn more about you? I know you have a blog on your Balti website. Where can people go to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Check us out, baltivirtual.com. You can go to /blog to see our latest and greatest thoughts. We're on all the social media channels, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. And so it's also a great way to follow our work.
Awesome. All right.
Thanks again for having me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.